Hello and welcome to A Blind Date with Knowledge, the podcast shining a spotlight on research in the North East. I'm your host, Stephen Liggett, and unfortunately for all Laura Brady fans out there, your only host this week. But please don't let that put you off, as I'm here to share with you a really special episode and one that I'm particularly proud of. One of the common themes from all of our discussions and from my research role is how we look to engage more widely with the communities around us, and in turn look to increase the diversity of research participants. And so earlier this year, I started volunteering for an organisation that looks to do just that. Healthwatch is an independent service that champions the voices and opinions of all those that use health and social care providers. All local authorities should have a Healthwatch, and their main aim is to bring representatives from all communities in their area together and to provide a platform for discussion, with the hope that it is these discussions that can inform and improve the services that we provide. And today you're going to hear from 4 amazing people that are doing great work in the community. We start with Vicky Jackson, an Engagement and Community Officer with Healthwatch South Tees. Vicky describes what Healthwatch does in a little bit more detail and shares some of her personal experiences with engaging diverse communities. We then hear from Ellie Graham. I really enjoyed the conversation with Ellie. Ellie is an independent advocate with the organisation We Are People First. Ellie takes us through what advocacy is, how it can be really powerful in research and health environments, and shares some top tips for how we can all start to think about advocacy a bit more. We then finish with a bit of a roundtable discussion with myself, Vicky, and a great couple, Terry and Yvonne, Bytheway. Yvonne is a volunteer and governor at South Tees, and she comes on to discuss the Forget Me Not card initiative and how this can help inpatients with communication needs and difficulties express their wishes. And Terry joins us as the chairman of the Teesside Prostate Cancer Support Group. Terry takes us through his cancer journey, how the power of positivity has helped him in remission, shares some of the signs and symptoms of prostate cancer, where and how you should get checked out, and some of the creative ways he's used to spread the word. Contact details are shared throughout the podcast, but for more information about Healthwatch, simply type Healthwatch Middlesbrough or Healthwatch South Tees in your search engine. And likewise for We Are People First. And Ellie also kindly shared We Are People First information hotline, which is 0300 303 8037. In the words of Laura Brady, let's get to it. So I'm joined here this morning with Vicky Jackson, who is the volunteer and engagement officer for Healthwatch. And does that cover both Middlesbrough and Redcar? Or
we're called Healthwatch South Tees, but we cover Redcar and Cleveland and Middlesbrough.
Fantastic. So before we discuss our involvement and how we started to know each other through the Community Champion Scheme, can you give an overview of what your organisation does and how kind of your role makes a difference in that, Vicky?
It's really hard to explain Healthwatch. Yeah. We're an independent organisation, and we basically are a champion for people around health and care. So the role is massive, the remit is massive, but in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Again, as I have discussed with a number of guests over the years on the podcast, it's that understanding the voice of the patient, understanding like the needs of the patient. It doesn't have to be a patient, it's just from my vocabulary. I think from a from my line of work, we speak about patients, but like how does Healthwatch actually do that? Because you've forged some fantastic links with communities, haven't you? So.
Yeah. So if I outline some of the things that we do and then how we do it, that's probably the easiest way to give you some examples. We have an information and signposting function, which people can email, they can text, they can call us, and also we go out in the community and engage a lot. So when I say information and signposting, I mean anybody who has a query about health, and that can be your doctors, that can be at the hospital, it can be dentistry or social care. So it could be care homes, that kind of thing. Anybody who's got an experience that they want to share or want some advice on, they can come to us. And we don't take on individual cases, but we have massive links within the community that we can refer on to. So we do that function through information and signposting, and we also, with our engagement, we're out in the community an awful lot. We have a network of community champions, which you're one of.
Yes.
And we hear about people's experiences through our community champions. So our community champions work with people or are in the communities of people who you would maybe not always get a chance to speak to.
No, I agree with that.
So it's really important for us to look at our area, look at South Tees, and make sure that we have contacts in different communities.
Yeah. Just looking at the demographics of Teesside as a region or South Tees as an area, it's very diverse. There's a number of different communities, and from my experience, they aren't always heard or represented on kind of panels or in groups. And so the work that you're doing, I think, is tremendous to try and bring in those voices and opinions.
Yeah, that's our passion really as well. And we try to make sure that we make connections with those communities. So, when I first started the job, this is just an example. So when I first started the job, I thought, everything I do will be social media and, just on the websites. And I'll be going out and talking to people and it'll all be promoted that way. But actually that within the first week, I realised that I didn't have a clue. Yeah. Just going out and speaking to people it was Men's Mental Health Week when I started.
Okay. Yeah.
So we went out on the Redcar and Cleveland Council have a mind bus. So we go around and they just go to local communities and talk to people and share information. And most of the people I spoke to at the first place I went to, which was Normanby, I think it was. Okay, yeah. They didn't have a smartphone.
No.
And I was taken aback by that. And since then, I've realised like you say, the diversity, the needs of our population, and South Tees has such a varied demographic. So central Middlesbrough is completely different to the rural locations of East Cleveland. There's such a diverse population.
And you mentioned an area there that I'm very passionate about, is that diversity can take a lot of different examples. So it's more as well of obviously the socio-economic. I was actually just having a discussion with someone yesterday about how the potential future of healthcare is more, like you wear a device or you attend your meetings online and stuff, but the majority of people who are in this area who don't have a smartphone, who don't have broadband quick enough to deal with all of these things, who couldn't access like the healthcare of the future. Those are the people that we need to speak into now to develop how are we going to bring all areas of our community along.
Yeah, absolutely. We did some work with substance misuse in Middlesbrough, and we talked to people who use substances, and some were on a programme where they were on methadone or other programmes, some weren't. And, those people would never, ever, ever be able to go around with those kind of devices.
Exactly.
How would you even tap into them? How would you speak to them? Because they don't have a mobile phone.
No.
The homeless, they've nowhere to charge
exactly.
it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, that's just the little part of it. So I think that we think in this digital world that everybody's going to be able to access it, and it just isn't true. And even with accessing GP appointments, that's one thing that we produced a really good guide on top tips for using your GP.
Yeah.
And we've got this like big booklet, and it talks about all the different additional roles and things like that. And it is really, really good. And we've had some printed, and everybody wants a printed version.
Yeah.
But we've only got a certain amount printed. Everybody wants a printed version. But in the guide, obviously, there's like QR codes and everything like that. So like for me, I'd just scan a QR code.
Yeah.
But the people we're speaking to, they're not interested in that because they haven't got a phone to scan a QR code in the first place. And we've sort of gone into groups and talked to people, just talk them through the brochure. And people have no clue. No. They have no idea about what's happening, and that is in your GP practice. You know, so the future for healthcare being with devices and smartphones, it is so far removed from a lot of our population that I think 100%. We really need to be listening to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that might take us on to the reason I first heard of Healthwatch and the reason I came along and now a community champion. It is, for a long time, the trust and the researchers that I know speak about how we develop our patient and public involvement, how we actually increase the diversity of research participants. Because at the minute, the demographic of people who take part in research is really narrow, usually white, middle class, tend to be educated of a certain age. And even if you just look at that practically, we don't know that half of our devices or drugs are active or work on huge areas of the population. So it's a very long question, Vicky, sorry, but how could researchers and healthcare in general learn from what Healthwatch are doing?
And I think that it all comes down to the community links that we have.
Yeah.
And I think researchers need to be involved with those communities and not just on a sort of superficial level. I think you need to go to the communities.
100%.
I do that. I like doing it, and you find out so much more by actually going. You don't need to do anything formal.
No. You
literally need to go, have a cuppa and sit and speak to people.
Yeah.
And then you build their trust. Because I think that, from our perspective, we're quite lucky in a way because we're an independent organisation. We're not the NHS, we're not the local authority, we're Healthwatch.
Yeah.
So there's that freedom to have an open and honest discussion.
Yeah.
So I think that you've got to get into the heart of the communities and linking in with organisations like ourselves, because there's Healthwatches all over England. It's not just has to be Healthwatch South Tees, but linking in with organisations like us, and we can then link you on further. We have I know that you're one of our community champions. We have community champions in so many different areas as well that, it's really helpful. I've just a lady that has just become a community champion in Shazia, and she works for Newer Fitness, and she works with different demographic groups, women mainly. And we've gone and we've spoken there because she heard we did a menopause event. So she asked us to go and speak at that community about menopause because actually that isn't discussed in those communities. No. So it's just about having open conversation.
Just having the channel or the opportunity to speak to a group of people about the research that we're doing.
Yeah.
You mentioned trust. I think it's why organisations like Healthwatch are superb, because we don't have to do all of the work or start again or start afresh.
Yeah.
We can just be tapping in like to your knowledge.
Yeah.
And researchers can learn from how you have cultivated your links with communities.
Yeah.
We should absolutely be using your links for patient participation groups, checking our documentation, checking our processes, because I don't think we've ever done that as an organisation.
Yeah, and you know, it goes both ways. Our community champions give us so much information, because one of the important things that we haven't mentioned yet is all of that community information that we get, we share on a quarterly basis with the providers of services, so they know what's happening. Mm-hmm. So, for example, on a quarterly basis, we'll send things through to the trust, and if there is something on there, we know that they're looking at it, because they'll come back and they'll say, were these two issues resolved? Yeah. So we do have a brilliant link to local communities. Really, Fantastic. We really do.
So just before we finish the first of our conversations, Vicky, you've spoke about what Healthwatch has achieved so far, your values of, engagement and collaboration. Does Healthwatch have anything they want to achieve still? Any visions or events?
There's so many
coming up in the future.
So many things. So our project lead Lisa is always has brilliant ideas, and she kind of drives us all. So we are really lucky to have her driving us all with her passion. But so the information we receive, all of this information and signposting, all of this community intelligence, that steers our priorities going forward. Absolutely. So that's why we had the menopause event, because we were hearing from a lot of women in our community that there was issues with HRT, there was issues with care. So that's why we had the menopause event. I'm in the process of doing some analysis of GP websites, because the patients were saying, like I said to you, everything's going digital, but is that accessible? So one of my volunteers is visually impaired.
Yes, yeah.
So they've looked, sort of reviewed all of the websites. I know you reviewed them for me as well.
I was just about to say, like, I would class myself as someone quite like savvy on the internet or websites, but some of them were so confusing. Yeah. And it was even little things like the colour scheme was really off-putting. The font was either like small or in a strange style. So how anyone outside of that with a visual impairment or struggles on the internet, I don't know how anyone gets around those websites.
Yeah, and I'm still sort of writing the report, because I've been waiting to link in with. So another thing that I'm doing on that specific thing is I've linked in with Connections College, and they're going to do like a group exercise. So it brings the young people in, and they're going to look at it as well, and then we're going to write a report on that. But all of those kind of things are always ongoing. We're looking at it's always GP access. Dental has been a big issue, and there's been a lot of information in Healthwatch England about that, mental health. And we also do, every year we do our Star Awards.
Yes.
I know the Trust do one as well, so it gets a bit confusing. So we're starting our drive for the Star Awards, and that's to recognise people who go one step further really in health and care, and also sort of volunteers are included in that, which is really nice as well. And that's sort of April next year, so we'll be starting to spread a lot of information about that as well.
So we will share your details on the platforms where you can find this podcast, but have you got any you'd like to share right now, Vicky?
Yes, so we have, because we cover South Tees, we've got two websites. So we've got Healthwatch Redcar in Cleveland and Healthwatch Middlesbrough. We've got a free phone number. It is a voicemail, but just leave us a message and we can get back to you. And even if English isn't your first language, you can leave a message and we can get that translated and have somebody speak to you. Really and BSL as well, we can get video interpreters if anybody needs it. Amazing. So the free phone number is 0800 118 1691. We've got a text only number, which is 07451 288 789. And then lastly, our email, which is healthwatchsouthtees@ pcp.uk.net.
Cheers, Vicky. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
So this morning I've been joined by Ellie Graham from We Are People First. Firstly, cheers for joining us this morning, Ellie.
Thanks for having me.
Are you okay to tell us a little bit about your role and the overall service that you provide?
Yeah. So our role is called an independent advocate, and we're there to support people through decisions or processes to help them have somebody independent on their side, help them represent their wishes and views to other people, make sure that their voice is heard, processes are followed. People First is a charity. We're rooted in self-advocacy groups. People with learning disabilities started the organisation, and that's where our values come from. And we work with a lot of people that have been deemed to lack capacity around decisions, so we're an important safeguard to make sure that they are listened to, especially when they have maybe communication needs that are different to most people. And we make sure that professionals that are involved or anybody else is listening to their voice. So we don't have an opinion of our own, and we don't put any of our own judgment in. We also can't offer any advice to anybody.
Fantastic. So you spoke there about the values of the organisation and how they come from the people that you have served or started the organisation. So what was your journey?
Into advocacy?
Yeah.
So when I was at uni, I did some volunteering with an older person's charity in York, and that was working with people over the age of 50. So that was my first introduction to what advocacy is. I guess a lot of people know what the word means in the general big sense. You're advocating for something, but I didn't know that it was a job or a role. So once I finished that volunteering, I was looking for my own job. Post came up then, and I was quite interested. Did my degree in human rights, which links very nicely to this. I definitely knew I wanted to work directly with people and for them. So I did the role, but you'll find that most people don't know that it's a profession.
Yeah.
So when I have to try and explain it to family and friends, it's a lot of trying to think of other words and examples that I can give.
There were several reasons for asking you on to the podcast, but a theme throughout the series that we've had is how we hear the voice of the patient and how we always have their aims and values at the heart of everything that we do. The research processes that we engage in have a lot of processes to do with the governance of trials, and consent is kind of a two-way process. But do you have any tips for anyone that's listening about how we actually start to think a lot more strongly about this advocacy?
Mm-hmm. I think it's harder for medical professionals that are maybe got a stake in what's going on, or they've kind of got to think about their own viewpoint, whereas as advocates we don't have to, which is quite a good thing. But the tips that I would give would be to just try and hold judgment. So especially if you're giving kind of the risks of safety procedure and the benefits, it's to try and just display them as they are without any kind of judgment on that. And also think about how it is for that person, what their situation is, and would that risk be more of a risk for them. But to just listen without judgment is a really good place to start. Ask them questions, help understand how they need information given to them, repeat that information, make sure that they understand it, give them time to think about it, suggest that they speak about it with other people that are close to them. Maybe it is that you could suggest that they could benefit from an advocate if they don't have somebody else around them. Or even if they do, people with family can still have an advocate, somebody independent. Again, family have got kind of, probably it's harder for them to give an objective, this 100%. Is what your options are. So the advocate role would be important there.
I think you've done a fantastic job there of describing why advocacy is important. Can you maybe take us through the journey of the patient who enters your service and services that you provide to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would get the referral through, and usually the details are quite limited on that referral. It's not that the person needs to share everything that's going on, but just a general reason why they want advocacy. So it might be that they're
struggling to understand what their options are and make that decision, or that they feel that maybe certain professionals aren't listening to them, aren't communicating with them when they need to be communicated with. So we would call them up and speak to them and give them an overview of what advocacy is. A lot of the time, the first step is to just check that it's the right thing for them. So it obviously, make it clear that we wouldn't help them make the decision, nor would we offer advice, but we could help them figure out options, and that we'd be there just as an extension of them and help them speak up and put forward their views. Given that that's all okay, we would look at what they want to happen. So we tend to go through an advocacy plan, which looks at what's the situation and what's kind of the end goals, whether it be the big overall goal or smaller steps towards that goal. And then we help them plan around that. So we talk about what they want to do, because the important part of our work is that we promote self-advocacy and don't take away from what they can do for themselves, but just support them to be able to do that. So they might ask us to attend a meeting, which is totally fine, but we'd want to set up practically what that would look like. So maybe we support them with planning the meeting ahead of time. It can be good to get a list of questions together, a list of talking points to help. And then we'd look at who's going to speak in the meeting, how comfortable is that person speaking up in a meeting. Obviously, it can be quite intimidating when there's lots of people sat around.
Absolutely, of course.
So, a lot of people might just say, no, I can't speak in those settings, in which case we would speak for them. But we just need to make sure that everything that we're putting forward is really what they want, which is why the plan's so important in the work beforehand. And then after a meeting, after a decision, after an event, we would sit through and talk with them about how that was. Did they find out all they needed to find out? Do they know what to do now? So go through it with them and then continue on like that. So the practical support is helping them communicate with people and then also kind of just making sure that they feel like they're heard is also a big part of our role, especially if they haven't felt that way in their current situation. So, things just as simple as, and I guess this comes back to the advice that you're asking for, is to just make sure that the person knows that you are listening, whether it be through body language or just saying, I understand, or letting them know that how they're feeling is totally valid, which they might not hear.
Just something you mentioned there about how situations that patients sometimes have to go in can be really difficult, can be quite intimidating. Is there anything from like a healthcare side of things that we could be doing to improve the experience of a patient?
I think it's different for everybody. So the first step would just be ask them what they need. But sometimes asking people what they need isn't always the easiest question. No. So to come with kind of adjustments that you could make practically would be really good. So things that people have asked for before, thinking in hospital settings, was to wait not in the main waiting room, but to have a side room before the meeting, to have an agenda of what the meeting is going to discuss before it happens. Obviously, going into a meeting to get some health information when you don't know what it's about can be really scary. So how much of that can you share beforehand?
That's a really good point.
If you're having a really big meeting with lots of people, do they all need to be there? Can you have it online? Is that better for the person? Making sure they know that they can have somebody in the room with them. And then you're thinking about communication needs as well. If you're just speaking things to them, could you also have it written down in the meeting? Something to go away with for them so they know exactly what's happened, because it can kind of be really scary in the meeting and then you come out of it and you just forget exactly what's happened.
And it's those adjustments that we, like, as I say, we as healthcare professionals probably don't think about because we're like so busy or we do these things all the time. So sometimes having the awareness that it is something totally new for people. Switching on that mindset maybe.
And saying that to the person. I think that's what I was going back to when I asked the team that I work with for kind of their advice. Somebody said that they found that just reassurance for the person that, we know this is a really scary situation, this is really difficult, but we're here to help you in any way we can. Ask them what help they need. Thinking about reasonable adjustments. I mean, a lot of people might not come forward and say that they find written information difficult or that they have sensory needs or whatever it might be. So asking the question outright, maybe it's a piece of paper that they could fill out before a form, so it's maybe not as scary. But always remaining what is person-centred in the sense of knowing that every situation will be different. So I guess you can't really standardise what you do.
No, you can't.
Probably think of some questions that you could ask everybody to know a bit more.
Standardisation is a word we use a lot because we like processes, protocols, but we can't, they should be tailored to individuals, shouldn't they? Absolutely. So something you spoke about, which I've found really interesting, was the concept of self-advocacy. Do you mind expanding on that element?
So it's kind of the ultimate goal for us with the people that we work with is, a lot of advocates will say, is to make ourselves redundant. Obviously, we know it's not practical or so even necessarily desirable for people to not need that support. But that's the goal, is that they would be able to do everything on their own and would feel confident enough and empowered enough to do that. So we have an advocacy charter which outlines the principles of advocacy that we must follow, and one of them is empowerment, which obviously directly relates to self-advocacy. So that's we want to help the person speak up for themselves. We don't overtake and we don't do it for them. We always ask them what they can do themselves. Even if somebody says to us, I can't speak in meetings, that's fine. But then the next meeting comes along, we would ask them, do you still feel the same?
Right, okay.
A good thing to do is when you spot somebody using those skills or developing new skills or gaining more confidence, is to just point it out. Because a lot of times you don't know that yourself. Do you?
No, you don't.
When you're doing something and you've changed, so just saying to them, like, you've obviously gained a lot more confidence now, you did really well at doing that. Did you feel that yourself? It's quite an empowering technique. Some of the other principles that we follow is about accessibility, which comes back to your point about talking about how do you make things accessible. So that's always our goal. Is it's not we're offering a service to everybody that fits everybody. It's what does that person need. So you're asking questions when you first start working with them about how do you want to be contacted, how often do you want to be contacted, how do you want information relayed, all those points that we talked about. And another big one is accountability. So for us as professionals, we make sure that everything that we do is what we said we were going to do. And we never give false promises. So we would never say to somebody, your goal to do whatever is definitely going to happen. We'll make sure it happens. It can be a nice thing to hear, but we can't promise anything, especially when decisions aren't for us to make. We've got no control over that. And obviously the big one, just to bring it back to our role, is the independence. So we're fortunate to be able to be independent, but it's not an easy thing to do, especially when lots of professionals are asking different things from you. Some will actually just ask us, what is your opinion? And, we've got to remind them we don't have one. That isn't inherently our role, that we don't have one.
It's really interesting hearing about those ideas around self-advocacy. I mean, those could be transferred into all sorts of skills and areas, developing staff, bringing on the confidence of others. I think it's just great to hear those being applied in a service you provide. But then I think it'd be great for people listening to this just to do a bit more research into self-advocacy and start to use it in different roles in their own services, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think so. There's a lot of self-advocacy groups that exist as well. There'll be a lot in this local area that are run by people, and they sit together as collectives and talk about how they do that, and that empowerment then comes from each other in kind of a peer support. So we do the independent advocacy, but there are all different types of advocacy. Self-advocacy, peer advocacy, the systems advocacy if you're thinking about bigger issues. So it's not just one thing. And I think I'm very much aware that the professional role that I do is what's come from these self-advocacy groups and social justice movements, and that's how it's originated. So trying to stay true to those roots and not, of course, a lot of things are being professionalised and standardised, and we work under statutory legislation, but remembering what is at the heart of advocacy. I think that's something People First are very much aware of because of where People First came from.
I mean, it's potentially a different conversation for another podcast, but it would be great to get you back on and speak about some of these social justice movements. This is where all of this comes from, the roots that people do have rights. There's a lot of strength in community action things, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's something that I guess we've got to look to other groups and signpost for that type of stuff, because unfortunately with our role we're working with just individuals on their individual goals. But obviously that is part of a much wider issue. So, we stay aware of kind of common trends that people are obviously experiencing and on what that points to. But there's groups out there that will be doing the self-advocacy support, that peer support that we can't do in our role.
Super. You do a lot, Ellie. You're busy. I bet
it's quite busy.
Have you seen an increase in demand for your services now? Do you think patients are a bit more aware of their rights, or it doesn't have to be patients, but do you think people are like they know a bit more about their rights and how they should be treated?
I think it's hard for our service because a lot of it is taken up by the statutory stuff,
Right, yeah.
which comes in and it's very much a steady influx. But as I was talking about with you earlier, was that there's maybe some gaps that we notice in not getting referrals from certain groups.
From certain trades.
So there's definitely awareness to be given then. I would hope that people know more about their options and rights, but
I hope so.
from things that, that I read and aware of, it's still very much the case that they don't necessarily, or that even if they do, they don't necessarily know how to go about getting those rights, especially when systems and certain
processes will just kind of cut them off.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first time I heard of the service that you provide was at a Healthwatch Community Champions meeting. Have you got anything to say about how we build links with these communities and how do we spread the word maybe more effectively?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Healthwatch event was great, and I think that's what we in People First in Teesside are looking to do, is really expand into the area and figure out what's already going on. We don't want to do work that's already been done. We don't want to take space from people that are already doing their own thing, but in whatever way we can help. And I think it's really important, like the Healthwatch Community Champions role is having those people there that have the experiences that they have and at the heart of their community that we can listen to and learn from, rather than just sitting around as a group of professionals maybe that you don't have that viewpoint for. So sharing the word that way is important. It's also important to get in just any space you can. So
absolutely. Yeah,
it's a great thing for us just to kind of spread the word through routes that we wouldn't usually go down and people we wouldn't usually speak to.
Perfect. So on the theme of spreading the word, how would anyone reach out to you if you got any contact details, a site anyone can visit?
Yeah, we've got a website, We Are People First, which will show all the different types of advocacy that we offer by area. So in Teesside, we cover all of the statutory remits, and then we also have our general advocacy, which is available for anyone, regardless of age or anything else. So you can put referrals in online. We've also got a phone number there if you needed to call. But yeah, I'm happy to share the Hub's contact details, and that's the group that takes the referrals in. And they can also offer advice on what type of advocacy is maybe fit in, or if it even is an advocacy issue, and if not, they could signpost to other services that we're aware of.
Well, thanks again for your time, Ellie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good discussion, and fingers crossed we can speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen.
So we're lucky to have a bit of a table discussion now. We still have Vicky Jackson here from Healthwatch with two more of the community champions. Can you maybe introduce them for us, Vicky?
Yeah, of course. So really lucky to have the lovely Yvonne and Terry Bytheway join us for a chat with Stephen this morning. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak to both of them.
Absolutely. I was delighted when you took up the invitation to join us this morning. So to maybe start with Yvonne, I was reading that you have been a governor and a volunteer at South Tees for many years. We were discussing this morning about how we start listening to patients more, how we understand their needs, their voice, tailoring patient care to them. Do you think the Trust does enough to do that, or is there any schemes that you can promote to help with that?
I think the NHS does an awful lot, and I'm really proud of them, and I owe a lot to the NHS. There's just little things, like, I'll tell you about my sister. She had a stroke and she was unable to speak. Mm-hmm. And for 10 years she was unable to speak.
Yeah.
Now, at the time when she was in hospital, I didn't know about these little cards called forget-me-not cards, and I wish I had done.
Yeah.
But since then, I'm working on her behalf. Yeah. I couldn't do it for her, but I'm hoping I can do it for other patients. I'm thinking of dementia patients, stroke patients, who were perfectly all right 1 minute, the stroke patients I'm talking about now, and then the next minute they can't speak. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on the ward, the ladies come around and ask, would you like a tea? Would you like a coffee? And they can't speak. And I'm thinking, and then they say, what would you like to eat? Would you like soup, sandwiches, whatever? And they're going through it. And then they'd say, oh, so you want a jacket potato? And I used to think, how do you know she wants a jacket potato? But this simple little card I know they've got patient diaries and what have you, but a lot of them are away in the files. This little card can just go on the bedside table. And it's very brief and basic, but to me it's so helpful. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the name you preferred to be called, because some people go by the middle name. Yeah. I now live in, I was born and grew up in, I worked as. It's instead of just being, putting it crudely, a piece of meat on the bed, it's a person. It's a bit about them, it's a bit about the background. And even other patients, if you can't speak, they won't try and communicate with you because they know you can't speak and they don't know a thing about you. Where I, as a volunteer, go in, and as I say, in 10 years, I've only come across one forget-me-not card. Yeah. There's quite a few more now, because every time I go in and I come across a patient that can't communicate, I'm out with a card. Yeah. And if there's a relative there, I say, can you, if they can't fill it in, can you fill it in on their behalf? It's got food and drink preferences, your sleep routine, things you enjoy doing, clothes you like to wear, things that make me anxious. I feel better when I let you know I'm in pain by people who are important to me, things that have happened in my life that's important to me, things that help me communicate and things I need help with. As I say, it's just basic, but to me, it's a godsend if you can't speak.
Yeah. I suppose it makes it less lonely for you, doesn't it?
It does.
A less lonely experience.
Yeah. And so I went in to see one gentleman patient who unfortunately couldn't speak, and he was just sat in his bed just staring into space. And I introduced myself, and there was no connection whatsoever. He just stared in space. But some kind relative or friend, I don't know who it was, had left a piece of paper on his bedside table. So I picked it up and I started reading it. And I said, going by this, you lived in Australia. I said, you're a professor in music. And I was running through the things, and he turned and he gave me eye contact. And then he started to nod. And at one time, I even got a little bit of a smile. And I thought, that's just because I know a little bit about you and a little bit about your background. And I thought, it's a simple thing, but I'd like to promote them a little bit more.
Where do people get them from?
Well, I raid the cupboard.
That's one way.
So that's where I get mine. In fact, the last time I went in, I couldn't find them, and I asked one of the members of staff, I said, where have they gone? I said, where have you put them? And they were under a lot of papers, so I brought them out and I put them on top again.
Yeah.
So, but it's a simple thing, and it's a godsend to some, and you never know what's going to happen in the future.
We were talking, weren't we, earlier about sort of how do you get the voice of everybody?
Yeah.
And that is so important, because Stephen was saying, and I would agree, that a lot of the times if you're doing research, we do a lot of research, obviously, and you get a very similar group of people who answer your questions every time. It's the same group. So it's how do you get those other voices heard? And things like this are vital, aren't they?
Well, and starts to personalise how you treat that patient.
Of course.
Because we are operating in services that are just super busy. There's a lot of pressures, but implementing a forget-me-not card is actually really simple.
Yeah.
And you're changing the patient experience overnight, really, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. And if other patients on the book ward see this, they can communicate. I mean, things that you've done in your life that's important to you. Just little things, but they're so helpful.
Yeah, because you know yourself when you're on the ward. I've only been in hospital when I've had my kids, but you chat to the people who are in the ward with you, and like you say, if they just think they can't answer, but if they could look at that and open that conversation in different ways,
you can.
The two conversations we had this morning previous to this was building up trust, and just by speaking to somebody, you build up the trust, you build up that relationship, and then hopefully that starts to take the pressure off clinical services, because straight away if anyone's in pain, if anyone's struggling, and it's just that two-way relationship is just, I suppose it improves all aspects of the service.
Absolutely, it does.
It helps also with the volunteers Because if you're a volunteer and you go in to see somebody and they can't talk, then what do you talk about? As a volunteer, you'd be stuck. Yeah. But having those cards, it generates a conversation.
And like that gentleman, it lifted him a little bit. And he started to communicate, nodding and a little smile. But when you see the ladies going in to say, on Tuesday, she was saying to one patient, do you want tea or do you want coffee? Do you want tea? And she was trying to mime it and she was getting nothing. And I thought, we just had a card there. We could see what she likes to eat and what she likes to drink. I mean, I've filled mine in. I'll eat almost anything apart from red meat. I don't like red meat. I've also put that I've got 2 broken vertebrae in my back, so I like to be laid on my side. Where if that happened to me, the nursing staff wouldn't know. No. Little things like that. I think everyone should fill them in. They should be in care homes, doctor's surgery. They should be everywhere. Fill one in, put it with your medical details. Take it in the hospital with you, and it's there, and you filled it in, and nobody knows you better than yourself.
So on my card, I'll have Yvonne's red meat.
Doesn't go to waste then.
It doesn't go to waste. No.
You both just described something there about generating a conversation.
Yeah.
So, like, how would you describe your skills in generating that conversation? Because obviously, as chairman of the Teesside Prostate Cancer Support Group, Terry, how do you describe your style in speaking to people? And
I like to think that whoever I'm speaking to, obviously these are all men because prostate cancer is a man's disease.
Yeah.
I'm giving them hope. Mm-hmm. I want to give them as much hope as possible about the future. Mm-hmm. Because I think when you're diagnosed with something like that, you start to think about your mortality. Yeah. You start to think about how long have I got left, all these sort of things, and that can really bring you down. And a lot of men will go into like introvert, go within themselves. They won't want to speak about it. They won't want to talk about it. And it's very difficult sometimes to actually get that communication going. But mine is one of hope. Because what I say is, I have got advanced prostate cancer. It's in the bones. It's incurable. And I was told it was terminal. They are words which strike fear into the heart of men. So what I say is, forget about what your diagnosis is. Keep on taking the treatments, obviously, because they are going to help you. But be positive. If you're positive mentally, then it will also help you physically, and it will also help you enjoy what life you have. It doesn't matter if you've got 5, 10, 15 years. Enjoy that life, because that is what you are. If you don't, then you're giving in. And when I survive in grand style. I go out and do it. Yourself. Make the world have me. You know what I mean? That's my motto. And I'm talking about this prostate cancer. It's now 7 years, 7 years that I was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. I am still going strong. I feel great. I am doing things I would never have done in my life before. And all because 7 years ago they said to me, you have a terminal disease. I have gone on and leaps and bounds since then, but I've made it happen. I wanted it to happen. I didn't want to give in, and I wanted to survive. And I said to the doctor, I want to be the longest surviving cancer patient in the world. You know what the doctor said? He said, if you are, will you mention my name? That's because, you see, the thing is, being positive drives you forward, and positivity will make you a better person. I've had great times since I was diagnosed because all my hang-ups I had before don't matter anymore. Before I used to think to myself, well, I can't do that because of that, and I'd make excuses. But now I say, what the hell, I'm just going to go and I'm going to do it and I'm going to enjoy it. And I've had put that philosophy out for that. It's a shame it's taken cancer to actually make me feel that way. But
to get into that headspace.
Absolutely, because that's a problem, isn't it? Because cancer is more than just a single thing. cancer is a double thing. It's a physical thing, which something you've got, often which people can't see, but then it's a mental thing. And that often is a really bad thing for people because they can't get it out their heads. I've got this cancer inside of me and it's going to kill me. Or even if you're in remission, which I've been on remission for so many years now, I'm really happy about that. But, I know, and I'm not stupid, I know that the cancer can mutate and come back again. But I'm not going to worry about that because let's deal with that when it comes, because I know there's still plenty of other treatments which can knock it back down again. So I'm not worried about that. What I concentrate on is me enjoying life, my family, my friends, because they become important people.
Fantastic. So that's like really great practical way of dealing with a diagnosis. I suppose the next question I have is that Health Teas is great for cancer studies, prostate cancer studies. Treatments are improving all the time. Mm-hmm. However, it's still that early intervention that makes such a difference.
Yes.
So in your experience and in your experience of the support group and stuff, I still don't know why blokes don't speak about it more, get checked out early. Does that go back to you don't get tested because you're scared of the answer maybe, or is it?
I think there's some of that in it. There's also, in my era, my generation, men were men, and we weren't supposed to show our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We kept everything bottled up inside, which wasn't a good thing. Because of that, a lot of men, particularly in the older generation, now we're looking at the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they come from a time when it was weak to show emotion, and men were afraid. And because even going to see, I'm going to go and see a doctor just for a checkup. Why? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me. Actually, that never happened because men were men and they didn't want to show any weakness, and therefore they didn't see the doctor. And one of the things about prostate cancer is often, and I would say in the majority of cases, there is no symptoms to begin with. On the early stages of a prostate cancer, there are no symptoms. The symptoms that do happen, like you go to the toilet more often, that's a regular one which happens. Maybe going more often during the night. There are certain key ones, which are like blood in the urine, but that's usually later down the line. Now, all these, going to the toilet and before you could hit the ceiling, now you can't even hit the ball. Yeah. You know what I mean? That low flow. Yeah. These are definite things. I think I just go and get a check. Now, checks, that's another thing men are afraid of. Yeah. Because they think of the finger of the backside, which is the examination which is given sometimes. But there are other methods now. Yeah. There is a PSA blood test. PSA stands for prostate-specific antigens, and these are created within the prostate and normally circulate in that area. If they get out into the bloodstream, it's a sign that there's issues with the prostate. So the higher the level goes, the more there is an issue. Generally speaking, if they're around between 4 to 5, then that's okay. As you get older, it tends to get higher anyway. It doesn't mean to say that because you have a high level that there is an issue, but it does. It's a key to saying, well, we can do further testing. Yeah, exactly. So I would advise any man over the age of 50 to go to their doctors and say, I want a PSA blood test. Yeah. And that would actually help them to find out whether there is an issue or not. I know men that have said, I have had no symptoms whatsoever, and yet because of what's been happening, I decided I would go for a blood test, and they found that I actually had prostate cancer. If they hadn't gone, they would have carried on, and it would have got worse. Find out, even if it's just just make yourself feel better. That I haven't got cancer. Yeah, no, but what you've got to realize, 1 in 8 men will have prostate cancer. 1 in 8. So if you're in a room of 80 men, you can say 10 of those men we're going to get prostate cancer. Also, one man dies every 45 minutes in the UK for a prostate cancer issue. So that is a horrible fact, one which I, myself, and lots of other people are trying to bring down, because the knowledge is key here. And if you go see the doctor, they find out they can do something about it before it escapes the prostate and then becomes a real problem.
Oh, fantastic. So I suppose for both of the subjects you've spoke about this morning, how important has it been to use the services of Healthwatch to spread your campaigns and to spread the word of these subjects that you're talking about?
I think both of them do an amazing job.
Yeah,
So I think it's really important for us to have Yvonne and Terry as community champions, because they're speaking to people that we wouldn't normally get to speak to. You know, Yvonne can tell me about these people that she's meeting on the wards. Terry, your experiences and your positivity that you can share with all of the people we work with. So I'm sure that there is things that there's benefit, but from a Healthwatch point of view, having you two as community champions is massively important, and all our community champions.
And the subject that we discussed earlier as well is that the messages are hopefully reaching diverse communities as well.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just speaking to yourself or your own community, you're spreading the word in various communities all over Teesside, I guess, by using Healthwatch.
And just like the forget-me-not cards, so Yvonne told us about them, we did a little blog on them, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
And then somebody said to me, my father-in-law has dementia and they can't speak, but they're in and out of the hospital all the time. And I said, have they ever had one of them? It's the little things. It's like I said to you before, it's not these big, massive sort of solutions. It's the little ground level things that, to me, make the world difference.
Of course they do.
They do. You know, we just need to hear about all of these people's experiences, and not just those people who are able to come and talk and share, because through people like Terry and Yvonne and our other community champions, we can hear from people who would never come and speak to me or you. They just wouldn't do that. Just wouldn't.
I think it's just so important to get the word out to all men, you know, to know that, there is this disease and it does affect a lot of men. Let me find out if I'm affected by it. And I'm going out tonight on Stockton High Street, singing away to all the men, trying to basically tell them, you know, get yourself sorted, get yourself checked. Raise awareness. Yeah. I'll raise awareness at any platform, any media I can, whether that's through going out to these shows, you know, like the Yorkshire show, and talking to men, or any place where men meet, you know, football grounds. I've tried it through the Riverside, and my work with PC UK, which is one of the main, you know, organisations for prostate cancer. We do all these events whereby we can either give a presentation to their staff, or we can hold like a stall, maybe on like a car motor show. Now, not a better place for meeting men, and they love their motors, you know. Yeah. But we've had a stall there. People come to the stall. We talk about it. We try and get over the information, because that's what it's all about. It's about them knowing, and it's getting the word out.
Yeah, and you do it very well. You do.
I think researchers and research teams can learn just from these discussions this morning about, you know, you have to go out and speak to these communities, speak to the people that you want to get involved in research.
Yeah.
And I hope that the conversations that we've had this morning have really shown that.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask. I would say to researchers, don't be afraid to ask other organisations if you can come along and share, because people like Terry, like Yvonne, are really keen for themselves and everybody's voices to be heard. And you get that across all the communities. You know, I work with so many different diverse groups, and there's more. There is more that I don't speak to, and I'm always trying to find those people. You know, I was saying to you earlier about like speaking to homeless people and things, and I can't just rock up and start talking to somebody who maybe is homeless, maybe has, you know, substance misuse, because they think, who are you? Who are you to start coming and talking to me? You know, so link up with people and don't be afraid to say, oh, would you mind if I just came along? Because we never would. We'd never mind, because it gets the message across, doesn't it? Because that's what we all want.
Well, the other important thing is the ethnic and the black community, because they are more at risk from a point of view of prostate cancer. For a black man, it was 1 in 4. So, you know, it's so important that we try and get those people particularly involved and to know more about it. And I'm always trying to find ways of getting into that community and I would be quite happy to speak to any community at all, you know, that so that I can, you know, bring the word.
We went the other week. We were really lucky that the Central Mosque in Middlesbrough, and they said you can just have a pop-up stand if you like.
Fantastic.
When it's the call to prayer, if you like. So obviously we went, and just doing things like that after people had been to pray, they came over and just everybody chatted to us, just chatted to us, and that's what you've got to do.
Well, I took the biggest risk. I actually did a big presentation for the police force.
Did you?
And I was there, and I didn't get arrested or anything. And particularly because I was actually
because I kept quiet.
I was actually in a show called Sister Act, and I played the part of a Philadelphia cop. So I actually wore my uniform to this police convention, and even they weren't in uniform, but I was the one who was in uniform with the police outfit. I even had a gun. I thought I was going to get arrested, but no, they saw the funny side of that.
And I can confirm he was very good in that, because we went to see him do it. It was marvellous.
But it certainly, what it does, it creates a point of notice. Oh, look at that over there. What's happening? Exactly. Then they'll come over to find out what's going on.
It's like your top you've got on today.
Well,
you've got your, I know nobody can see, but you've got your fighting prostate cancer. It's got his name on the back. Brilliant.
It's basically me carrying my life on my shirt.
No, but again, it's being creative, getting yourself out there.
You need the word out there. Until I start working in the hospital, I didn't know about all the different departments that can provide help. But you don't know where to go. You only know about PALS. But there are so many organisations that's willing to help and can give you professional help as well. To put you on the right path. But I'd like information going out on appointments. I realise there's my son who's diabetic has just got an appointment letter, and there's something on the back. About, I think it's Healthwatch. And I thought, that is brilliant. Just contact details. But if something like that about various departments, something very brief, but contact numbers, briefly what they do, be a godsend. And also flyers on the information desk. And also in care homes and places, doctor surgery, places like that. You know, that's getting the word out there, because I hadn't a clue before I started working in the hospital.
Spreading the message, but I'd just like to say it's been a superb discussion, so thank you all for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.